Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the POG_championships Twitch channel. My name is Jack, and today we have a very special interview with this year's POG champion, Mr. Isaiah Bradner. So, Isaiah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Jack? Thanks for having me come on.
Yeah, very well, thank you. And yeah, we wanted to chat about last weekend. Obviously, it was one of the biggest tournaments we've had in a little while, and the same sort of time as Worlds. So it was a pretty big deal. So we wanted to get you on and have a chat about how you did. So first things first, tell us a little bit about yourself. When did you start playing? Where are you from? All the good stuff for anyone that doesn't know.
Yeah, so I've been playing for, I think it's about 4 years now. I played in seniors for 3 years, and then I recently aged up into masters this past year. And I played in masters this past year. I am from the United States, Virginia, which is on the southeast, more like central, but very east, on the East Coast for those of you that aren't from the United States. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. My accomplishments, the biggest ones are in masters. I got top 4 at the Atlantic City Regionals, and then top 8 at the Knoxville Regionals, and I won the 2019 North American International Championships in seniors.
Pretty impressive accomplishments so far, yeah. And obviously your first year in Masters still doing well, so that's always good to see. First things first, congratulations on this weekend.
Thank you.
We saw you pilot a pretty familiar Pika list, in all honesty, but with a couple of Darkness Ablaze cards here and there. And we saw that same list do very well in top 8 as well. So obviously it was a list that you guys had prepared and sort of come to after a lot of testing. First things first, why Pika? Did you start there, or did you get there after a little while of testing other decks?
Yeah, so Pika, I definitely did not start there. That was actually kind of maybe my resort, I would say. I really wanted to play Senna Scorch because I thought it was just by far the best deck. But after a lot of testing, I kind of felt I had an unfavored ADP. And so then I kind of moved on to playing ADP. I thought ADP was just so broken. It was so fast and consistent. But then after playing more ADP, I tested a ton of it. I played a lot of ladder. It kind of felt like the way that I described the deck after testing it was the deck had like a 70% chance to win the game, but the 30% chance you lost, you could do nothing about. The deck literally had no counterplay. All you did was you just kind of slammed your cards on the table, used your GX, and then hoped you hit the gust 2 turns in a row to win the game. And while that did work sometimes, obviously there were things your opponent could do to exploit it, and if it didn't work, you just lost the game. So while I started with trying to play the huge tag team or VMAX decks, I eventually fell back to playing Pika because it felt like it was the only deck that could come back after a slow start. All the other decks in format, it kind of felt like the game was over on turn 2. One player would have a huge lead and the other one couldn't come back. But with Pika, you have so many comeback mechanics with Raichu, Reset Stamp, Vikavolt V. There's just so much that can do to come from behind, even Tagbolt taking multiple prizes a turn, that I think that's why I really fell back to it, because it felt like I had more options and the game was in my hands with the deck. While with other decks, it felt like, I couldn't really do anything. I couldn't really outskill my opponent at all.
Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously, like you say, the variety of different attackers that the deck has, you've got lots of different options in almost every matchup. And we saw that throughout your journey playing against all sorts of different decks. So that makes a lot of sense. The first card I want to point out in particular is the double Vikavolt. Obviously, we had a whole new set, but the only 2 cards you decided to add into the deck was Vikavolt V. And most Pika lists we saw leading into this tournament were only playing the 1. So I'm interested to hear why you went for the 2 count in particular.
Yeah, so I think that was for sure one of the odd things about our list. The other odd thing about our list was the engine. People have really favored the tag call variant and the Volkner variant in Pika, and that's actually one of the reasons we went to the double Vikavolt, because in that mirror matchup where they're playing Volkner and Guzmahala, they play a supporter to grab an energy card. Their Volkner doesn't even do anything whenever you're Vikavolt locking them. So that was one of the big reasons we went for the double Vikavolt. But we started with the 1 pretty much like I'm sure everyone did. It was an auto inclusion in the list. But we found out almost through our grinding the night before, I think was when we really noticed it, that you wanted to use 1 Vikavolt pretty much every game as your first attacker. You wanted to go in with it. It would slow your opponent down, and it would allow you to build up your big Pika in the back. And then at the end of the game, a lot of times there were situations where you could go like stamp, boss something with a big retreat cost, and then item lock it again, but your Vikavolt would be dead. So you didn't have a way to get it back. That was kind of the first reasoning of, maybe we could use a second copy of it. And then as we continued testing, we realized if we really want to use this every game, then we want a higher chance of drawing into it. We never want it prized. So that was kind of the final logic. It was at first that, actually having 2 in one game is really good, and it can just be game winning in some matchups. Like Baby Bounce, they can kill the first one, but they have no way to get around the second Pika Bolt. But then it just kind of built on in that, you want the first one for the early game, you want the second one late game, just having both of them for the option. That was really huge. And then finally, Pika Bolt's actually your best closing attacker, because if you use your Tag Bolt, then nothing else in your deck does as much damage as Pika Bolt's 190 finish off the game. So even that was good to have one late game, because it's not a horrible third attacker. Like full blitzing onto it isn't amazing, but it's also not the worst thing ever. So that's kind of a reason why we chose to play the 2.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I think a lot of people, it goes over a lot of people's heads, that second attack. They just focus on the item lock, but the second attack is really strong. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In general, were there any other Darkness Ablaze cards that you were considering? There weren't too many tools for Lightning decks in the set in general. A lot of the focus was on stuff like Center Scorch and Eternatus, but there was a couple of things that you may have been interested in. I don't know whether there was anything else that you tried out and didn't like.
I don't think so. To be honest, I can't tell you off the top of my head if there were any other cards that were like in the list at some point. But oh yes, we actually did try a turbo patch variant of the deck, where we played like heavy turbo patches for energy switch and just tried to get early attacks better, but it ended up being really bad. So that was the only Darkness Blaze card I think that almost went in the deck.
Okay, interesting. And now on reflection, would you make any changes? Maybe not back to that turbo patch variant if you said it was a little bit lackluster, but would you have made any changes to your 60 despite winning the tournament? Would there be anything you'd perhaps change the counts of, or anything that you felt you were missing throughout the day that you wish you'd played?
I don't really think so. I was a little bit worried going in about only playing 2 energy switch. It was something that my friends had been, Justin and Will, they've been playing the Pogchamp deck. We've all been playing it, I guess, but they played 3 energy switch the entire time the deck was legal. They said it really needed it, but we cut down to 2 for this event. So I was a little bit scared going in, but that never really hurt me. I didn't really miss the 3rd energy switch. Another count that I could see upping is the 2 to Dene. There's kind of been a history that at our international events, we've played 1 less Dene than we needed. So we were also really scared that, the 2 wasn't going to be quite enough for us. But with the Jirachi, with the research, it ended up being fine for me. I think that if I wanted to change anything, it might be cutting a big charm for that 2nd to Dene, or 3rd to Dene, sorry. But I think that looking back on it, the 2nd big charm actually won me a lot of games, especially against ADP. It's just so crucial in that matchup. You need to find it. So I think that looking back on it, I would keep my list the same if I were to run it back.
Okay, that makes sense. Like you say, the 3rd to Dene is probably the only card that I think in general people may play. So that all makes sense. Speaking, I guess about the deck in general, were there any matchups you were concerned about, or did you feel like you've said that you felt like you had counterplay to almost every deck in the format, in the sort of in the space of reset stamp, paralyzation, all of that kind of stuff. But was there any deck that you just really did not want to see?
I think that there were 2 matchups that I was kind of wary of hitting. I didn't want to hit Eternatus that played Switch. I know that there ended up being very few of those in the tournament. I think that a lot of them chose to play the Dark City variant of the deck and didn't play any Switch in it. But I was scared of playing Eternatus that played Switch, and then I was also scared of playing against the Sleepy Mill variant, because while that matchup can be fine if you get an early Pika Bolt off their deck, unlike Sanders, doesn't really have a ton that they can do. But I was just scared of that matchup. It's a pretty weird matchup. It's very draw dependent, so I didn't want to hit Sleepy Mill. I'd rather just hit attacking decks instead.
Okay, that makes sense. Speaking of Sander, obviously you played in the final, and Sander's infamous for building his own 60 that sometimes only he can ever explain. Going into that matchup, obviously the deck lists were open, so you knew exactly what he was playing, but there's argument to say that probably didn't even help to some extent. So wacky some of his lists. What were you thinking going into that matchup? Thinking, I know this is a matchup I have not tested against. How did you sort of think about approaching that matchup?
Yeah, Sander is actually one of my favorite players. I've loved Sander for years. I've talked to him a few times. His deck's always blown my mind, super impressed me. So huge shout out to him, amazing player, and obviously very worthy of the 2nd. But as I was going into finals, I talked with a few friends. I sent them the list, and we talked over it, and we kind of came up with a general game plan. It kind of made sense to leave Vigavolt because while his deck was very interesting, it looked a little inconsistent, right? He has, I think, 2 Zacian, and then his only draw supporter was 1 Cynthia and 2 Birdkeeper. I guess he had 1 or 2 Cynthia Caitlyn, but he had very few draw cards in his deck. And if he didn't draw his Mincinos and Cincinos raw in the early game, then he wasn't going to be able to make do and burn through his deck and get all the cards he wanted for his combos. So I knew that I had to lead Vikavolt V. And then I kind of had to feel it out through game one. That's really all that I had. I knew that I had to tag bolt at some point, and I knew I had to tag bolt to win the game because I might need to use Aurora's Jack stack to recover energy. But going in, I knew that with Vikavolt and then Marnie was another weapon that I have against him. It was actually huge in the finals because he went Rosa for Channeler, and I was able to Marnie it right to the bottom of his deck. That was one of the key points in the finals. So going in, I just knew that I had to lead with Vikavolt, pay extreme attention to where his cards were so I could know when to Marnie, and then manually power up a Pikarom to get those final 3 prizes because I knew that if I ever broke lock, then it was most likely his deck was just going to pop off. And I think I had to get a little bit lucky game one. I'm not sure if he prized Articuno or Boss. I know he was looking for that over the 2 turns, I'm guessing. But other than that, that was pretty much the game plan I had. Just lead Vikavolt, see where it goes, and find my way into a tag bolt win.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And like you say, it's so difficult to, especially in the short amount of time you had in between sort of seeing the list and actually having to go into the game. I would imagine it can be somewhat intimidating looking at a list like Sam.
Yeah.
36 one-offs or something crazy. So yeah, it's definitely a pretty good feat to be able to overcome that. So yeah, definitely a really, really good game that we got for the finals. In general, that was the last pre-rotation tournament. Obviously, the rotation hit the ladder. It was either today or yesterday. So now we're all involved in post-rotation. Have you done much post-rotation testing so far?
I haven't done a ton. I've done a little bit. I did a bit before with one of my friends who's playing in the Players Cup, but
okay.
I haven't done a ton this week, unfortunately.
Okay. Has anything stuck out to you that you have been able to try?
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about post rotation. I personally think Eternatus is going to be the best deck in format, almost by far. I think it's just so consistent. Pre rotation, there was, while it was a great deck, I think that there were other decks obviously that could exploit it, right? I mean, Pikarom, I felt like had a fine matchup against it, but Eternatus was kind of thought of as the top dog of that format. So I feel like they were kind of trying to make sure they were going to beat it. So that's why I didn't like it last format. But I think going into this format, it's once again going to be the strongest deck. It doesn't really lose anything, and it's just fast and consistent. So I think that's the best deck. ADP is obviously still going to be strong. I haven't played any Inteleon. I've played against it and lost to it a lot, so maybe there's something there. But those are the decks that have kind of been interesting to me and what I've seen do well from these early post rotation stuff.
That makes sense. And obviously, with rotation happening, we lost 4 or 5 sets worth of cards. What would you say is the card that you're going to miss the most this year in Standard?
Yeah, I personally am gonna miss Oranguru Ultra Prism a lot. I love Pidgey. It's probably my favorite deck of all time to play. I absolutely loved playing it. I loved building it. I think that being able to build control decks around Oranguru took so much skill, especially in a format with ADP, which while it isn't the best card design, it definitely makes building control decks a lot harder. Without ADP, it was very simple. You kind of had this staple of you just could play the chip lock and then you had 10 free slots for whatever you want. But with ADP, you really had to tailor your deck in a way that you could still stand up to ADP, but still beat the rest of the field. It was extremely hard to do. So I thought that was extremely interesting. I loved Oranguru as a card. I love playing control, so I will definitely miss him as he rotates. Interesting.
And yeah, in general, I guess another question that I should have started with, but overall, you've kind of said one of your favorite decks of all time was Pidgey. But in general, are there any other decks that you, over the past 4 years that you've been playing, that sort of really stick out to you as decks that you've enjoyed?
Yeah, I think that my top 3 decks that I played have to be, I don't know what order they mean, but Pidgey, Buzzrock, and then the Zoro Naganadel Dugong deck that Stefan played at NASE. I think that those 3 are my top 3 decks. Buzzrock, you had so much control over your games. All you needed was really an energy and some Pokemon, and then you could win the game. You didn't need a draw supporter. It had so many ways to come back. And kind of the same thing with the Zoro Checkmate deck. It could really be anything. It had so many tools, and you could win the game a variety of different ways. It really had so many avenues your opponent had to play around. So I think those are my favorite 3 decks that I've played while playing this game.
That makes sense. Obviously, we haven't had any events now for well over 6, coming up to 6 months, really. Everything's kind of moved online. Have you been able to play any other online events at all, or has it been maybe mainly just sort of PTCGO ladder testing and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I've played a few different online events. I haven't done particularly well in any of them. I participated in the Limitless Qualifier number 4, didn't do amazing in that, and I didn't play in the Players Cup, but I got to watch my dad play in the Players Cup, so
Oh,
that was kind of fun. But nothing huge. I played a few small tournaments in the JGB circuit, but I haven't played many online tournaments at all. So I was very excited to have a huge tournament like the POG Championships to grind for and get the test.
definitely. You mentioned your dad there. Is Pokemon a big part of your family, or is it more than just you that plays?
It is. So my dad knows how to play, but it's not really a big part of my family. The rest of my family doesn't really know how to play. They don't enjoy the game as much. I'm hoping to teach my little brother Benson. He's 5. He's learning how to read and numbers, so I'm hoping to teach him up to be a big Pokemon prodigy. But he's my last chance at another Bradner that plays Pokemon.
Hopefully you can get there. I'm sure he's got a strong support network with you being able to, show that you can get the results. So yeah, I'm sure we'll see another Bradner on the circuit soon.
I hope so.
Yeah, in general, so you said you haven't been able to play too many online events, but you're able to play in this one. Sort of in general, obviously it looks like we're probably not going to have IRL events still for a little while. Is there anything
Yeah.
that you'd like to see from online events in the future?
I don't know. I really enjoy the Swiss format where it's best of 3 personally. I know that that's a lot harder to run, and obviously that takes a lot longer. So um, yeah, I'm not really sure. I think the online events they've done a pretty good job of kind of fixing themselves, right? They have the issues, and then as they move on, they kind of patch up those issues to get a lot better. And yeah, I'm not really sure. Whenever I think of something that I'd like to see in online events, I guess I'd just like to see more of them, more bigger ones. I'm not sure that I really have any huge criticisms or any huge suggestions for the creators of the events.
That's the thing. I think the more we get in general, like you say, the issues iron themselves out, and
Mhm.
the bigger the player base, it's always obviously great to see these big events. And obviously, with events being online now, I feel like they're a lot more accessible to both players in general that have been playing for a while but couldn't go to events, but also newer players. You mentioned at the start you're an aged up senior, so obviously you did really well in seniors, winning NAIC, and then you came into masters, and within 2 or 3 months you got third place in AC. So that was obviously what were you able to bring from seniors? What do you think is maybe to some newer seniors or masters that are just aging up now? What do you think is some of the key things um, to aging up? Because it can be quite intimidating going from juniors to seniors or seniors to masters. I know I've done it as well. So for sure, what are some things that you'd say maybe to newer people coming into the age division?
Yeah, it definitely is an intimidating, kind of process. You go to these events, you hit even seniors to, or even juniors to seniors, but even more so seniors to masters. It just goes so much in size. You go from these 7 round events where you need to win 5 to get top 8 to these 9 round events that's only the first day, and you have to win 10 or 11 games to even make the top 8 cut. So it's definitely a big transition. The number one thing that I think helped me really get my feet in masters so quick was that I had a great group of guys that I was able to test with, and I was able to really network. And so I think that that's a huge thing for anyone that's aging up. You need to have a really solid group of friends that you can talk to about your decks, that you can discuss stuff with. And even if you don't have a great group of friends and it's just, messaging various people, that's fine too. You want to be talking to multiple people about Pokemon. You want to kind of be getting as much information as you can when you're aging up. And this kind of applies to playing in general. Just um, it's very hard to do well by yourself in this game. Even though it's an individualized game, it's very hard to do well just by yourself. And you see that through coaching, you see that through articles, you see that through Twitch streamers. There's a large audience of that. So I think that my best advice would just be to find others that you can talk to and message others, even if you don't. Top players. I've messaged a few of them in seniors whenever I wanted help, and they responded. They were very kind. So don't be shy to message people that you think are better than you, and yeah, just practice and get better at the game, I guess, is my best advice.
That all makes sense, and I guess that kind of ties into um, sort of what you feel sets maybe a more average player apart from a top player. I guess is the amount of testing and time and commitment they put into the game. Obviously, it's whilst it's still a hobby, you have to be able to um, you know put some time into it, be able uh, to see the results if that makes sense. In general, to newer players as well, if maybe the players that don't even have those networking sort of access to that networking because they haven't even met some of these players, maybe players coming to their first events, what kind of advice would you give to someone who was just maybe whether it be online or just in general at some of the IRL events? What advice would you give?
So I think that the advice that I would give to someone who's just trying to start out is that, just stick with it is one big thing. The game, it's a hard game to play. It's not an easy game to play. So maybe you won't do well at your first event. Maybe it won't go amazing, but I would just, think of the highlights. If you maybe had fun, if you felt great in this one game where you felt like you made a good play. So just stick through it. And then number two is I would say just try to play as much Pokemon and watch as much Pokemon as you can. Especially if you're a newer player starting out, just playing more and more games and then watching more games, even watching games from one thing that I do is I go back and I watch previous Twitch streams. So like if you're a new player, you can go back and watch like last year's Oceania Championships, or you go on Twitch and you watch Azul play Pokemon, right? These are some of getting to watch some of the best players in the game and just getting exposure to how they play the game. And I think that's a really big thing when you're starting out playing. So, just stick with the game. It might seem hard, but if you really try hard enough, then you can actually become good at it. And then playing more Pokemon and watching Pokemon as well.
Definitely, that's really good advice. So yeah, to round things off, I don't want to drag on too long. Just to round things off, once again, congratulations. If there's any shout outs you have, obviously, like you say, there's a lot of networking going on in Pokemon. You came up with the list together with a few friends, so feel free to take the floor and give some shout outs to people that may or may not deserve it. You never know.
Yeah, first of all, I said this on my Twitter, but huge shout out to my mom. She actually woke me up on the day of the tournament, so I would not have played in any of POG if it hadn't been for her to wake me up. So thank you so much, Mom. I want to thank my dad for all the support he gives me in general. I love being able to talk decks with him. It's just great to have a parent who who understands the game and can support me through it. And then I gotta shout out all the boys that helped me test. Shout out to Ricky Gao, Mustafa, Justin McCurry, Will Jenkins, Kenny Britton, Kiana Meany, Michael Catron. There's so many people that helped me test for this event. So thank you to all you guys and for all the support. And then thank you to everyone who said congratulations to me. It really means a lot to see everyone so happy that I got this win. So thank you all for the support. And then thank you guys for having me on this interview.
Of course, and congratulations again. You definitely deserved it. One final thing, where can people find you? You mentioned your Twitter. Where can people find you, just in case they want to hear some more great opinions from Pogchamp?
Yeah, so follow me on Twitter at Isaiah Bradner. That's pretty much the only social media I have other than Facebook. So go follow me on Twitter at Isaiah Bradner.
Thank you very much. And other than that, thank you to all of you who have tuned in today, whether it's live on Twitch or when this goes on the YouTube. Thank you for all of your support during this whole event. Thank you for all turning out for this year's Pog Championships. It was a really, really enjoyable tournament. And maybe even if events are back next year, maybe we can run something similar next year. And maybe this can be sort of a yearly thing in the calendar. So yeah, other than that, this will probably be the last time you see us for a little while. So yeah, thank you very much to everyone. Congratulations again, Isaiah, and we hope to see you all hopefully for the Pog Championships 2021.
See you guys.